quick on what I intend to do here, by the way, is to share with you guys what our approach on the campus team has been to solving some of the problems we've had with search over the last few years. So real quick, what is Campus? So Campus is a SharePoint Online based solution. We sit in the Microsoft internal tenant, so we share the tenant with HR Web and with an internal training system and a whole bunch of other properties. So we are in a multi-tenant, which provides us with a lot of benefits, and there are some drawbacks too, which I'll mention as I go along a little bit today. We support about 21,000 services field personnel, and they are distributed globally in almost every country. And there's probably 50 some odd roles in this services organization. Everything from sales through support through Premier, which is contractual based support specific to a company. We've got consultants, we've got architects. There's all kinds of different roles in services. And what Campus provides to these guys are three primary things. One is if a engagement is sold to a customer, we create a SharePoint project site for the team that's assigned to that project to go to collaborate. So the documents that they're going to be working on for that customer are stored there, and that's where all of those assets will exist throughout the life of the project. The other thing we support in Campus is the communities. So if an architect goes and designs the perfect architecture for Azure AD and thinks it's the bee's knees, the architect can load that up to the community library, and the field can discover it through the community library. There's also things like SMEs that can rate it and provide reviews and things like that. So there's other capabilities in the community space that we do provide. And then the last thing that we support is we host the content. And content comes in all kinds of forms. It could be a Word doc and PowerPoint. Those are the most common. Of course, Excel spreadsheets and that. But it could also be zipped up code. It could be videos. It could be VHD files for virtual hard drives for virtual machines. Almost anything will end up at a Campus project site. So what we've done is we've tiered our content. At the top tier, we have something we call managed IP. The managed stuff is the curated stuff. It's the things that we have that are being developed at the corporate side, usually in support of an offer that the sales folks go out and sell. So that's the stuff that the field is directed, go use this stuff. This is the most reusable IP because it's built to be used. In the middle tier, we have what we call community IP, which I mentioned before. I've created something I think is great. I upload it to your portal, and now you can discover it through the community IP. So that's just the shared crowdsourced type of content. And then at the bottom tier, where most of this stuff sits, is the individual IP. That's the content that is sitting in those project sites. It's usually very customer specific. So just some stats to give you an idea of the scope of what we do or scale of what we have. We've got about 16,000 monthly active users out of the 21,000 in our audience. And that's unique users. So the vast majority of the audience is in there about once a month, or at least once a month. Most of the time it's several times a month. It does depend on the role. Some have to use it more than others. We have actually it's now about 125,000 project sites that sit in Campus. So we are the largest property in the Microsoft internal tenant because those are scattered across about over 200 site collections. And then we get about 12,000 searches a month on average. Now that is just straight user going to our search box and putting in a keyword. We get about 12,000 of those a month looking for content. And we host about 2.5 million documents across all these site collections, and that does include the managed and community IP. So how many of you guys are CAM practitioners and actually work on a CAM system for your company? Cool, good, lots of you. I would expect that at a CAM World Conference, wouldn't you? How many of you guys have heard some variation of this feedback? Oh, thank you. I was going to feel real awkward if it was just me. I've worked on the Campus team for 4 years and really focused on search for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, but we have been hearing this feedback for some time. And some variation of search sucks. Now, to be perfectly honest, My initial reaction to that over the last several years has been, I actually fell prey to the data because I'd go look. You tell me search sucks, so I'd go look. What did you search for? What did you do? I'd talk to you and find out. What were you looking for? What went wrong? And what I really found out was the #1 search in campus, and this is Microsoft. Think technical people. The #1 search, keyword search, Azure. #2, SharePoint. So you're a salesperson, you do a search for Azure, and you're surprised you didn't find something that was really relevant on the first page, because that was the other thing, is they wouldn't even go to the second page. Then it just became, your search sucks. And then we'd look at the data though, and we'd see in the data, well, 75% of the keyword searches resulted, or 75% of the search sessions, I should say, resulted in the user downloading something. So it wasn't abandoned, it was successful. I've got #1 search is Azure. 75% of our sessions are resulting in somebody downloading something. And then I'd look at the other data around it and decide, well, the other bit of interesting information, the average number of words used in a search string. And this is over the course of 4 years, 1.4 words. So, wow, okay, I'm not surprised you didn't find what you were looking for. I fell prey to the data until one very helpful guy in the field sent an email about 3 levels up above me, just short of the VP of Services. Sent an email, and in his email was, search sucks. And then he attached to his email this huge attachment that had screenshots of absolutely everything he tried to find a document and wasn't successful in finding it. So I went through that because it went way up the food chain, and of course came over to my side of the food chain and came rushing back down. So I took a look at it and was parsing through his feedback, and immediately realized that if he'd have clicked on a filter, or if he'd have clicked here or done that, he would have found it immediately, because what he was looking for was there. He just wasn't following what you would expect to be a behavior, right? It wasn't using the filters, wasn't using the other options. We have 3 different ways you can find content in campus, 3 different entry points to search. We've got a menu option where it's show me all the stuff for my domain. Services is broken into 6 different domains. Then we've got another one on the home page where what we call guided search, we introduced recently, where you pick some drop downs, we pull some data about you, and then you click submit, and there you go. And then you got the full text. If he'd have used any of the other 2, either of the other 2, he'd have found it immediately. If he'd have used a filter on full text, he'd have found it. But what I decided to do was stop for a minute. Since it had come rushing back down, there was some focus on it, and it was an opportunity. So I took a look at it and realized, we had released a revised version of our search page, but clearly it wasn't working. The page itself was probably not intuitive enough. I would have expected him to click on these things. I thought, because I helped design it, thought this would be good. We missed something. So we decided to start over from the beginning. And since I had the focus and attention of leadership at the time, great. I had some executive buy-in to go fix this. So when I say start over from the beginning, I really meant it. Let's go figure out what we're trying to do. Let's validate our business case. What are we trying to accomplish in campus when it comes to search? So we went out and I talked to the leaders from our business and got names from them. Who should I talk to? What are the roles that are important? What are their personas? Let me talk to people. Then we went back and combed through the feedback we got, and we talked to those people again. And we compiled the list of personas, and we went through all the feedback to figure out what the core issues were. So we really went back to the basics. And we came back with pretty much what we'd started with. This isn't anything nobody ever thought of it. We just came back to what are you looking for? And the core really was, I'm looking for content. I'm looking for projects like the one I'm working on. I'm looking for people that were associated to those things. Those are the 3 core things. Code was Kind of separate because searching for code's a little unique versus searching for content. It's a slightly different paradigm, but still, it's a content type of experience. So they're really looking for those things. And sometimes they want a different pivot on things depending on a role. Sales folks like to see what's going on with companies. But it's still the same concept behind it. They want to see the content, they want to see the people, just put it in a pivot of a company. So this is, by the way, this is what I was presenting back to the leadership after these discussions to help frame what we wanted to do and why they would want to consider making an investment in this. So I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself here. So a couple of the challenges that you, of course, immediately run into. The first is discovery is a personal activity, completely. When I sit down as a user, because Google started this whole search first paradigm, right? Don't look, search. So when it comes to search, search is personal, it's contextual, it's I'm looking for whatever in the context of what I'm thinking right now. And the thing that you'll run into when you start thinking about this is what I'm looking for today is going to be different what I'm looking for tomorrow, and there's every chance I'll use the same Azure search term both days. The next part of it is context is king. We've heard this in a couple of the presentations this week on this track, right? Context is everything. It drives the relevance. Who are you? What role do you have? What project are you in? So when you do a search, what project are you searching from? Which project site, in our case, are you searching from? That all drives context. That helps with the relevance. That helps me understand the context. That's all inferred. Then you've got explicit context, right? The context that the user is telling you. And that's what two of the things we really wanted to solve for, is the inferred and explicit. So your explicit comes from the UX. The user is telling you in your UX what they're looking for. Use that information to reduce the size of the haystack. Most of the time, looking for stuff is looking for a needle in a haystack. I see my goal, reduce the size of the haystack. Make it a little easier to find. So bottom line is it's all about me as the user. So we then came up with a few, what are some of the things, what are the principles we're going to go after here? Above the line here are really UX types of things. Below the line is really content. So what are we really going to go after? Well, one of the things is the best search experience is one I don't have to do. If I don't have to go search for it, I'm a happy camper. So recommendations. Drive the right stuff to the user as they're working, which is the next one. Catch them in the act. So in services, one thing that Microsoft Services likes is tools. We create a lot of them. And a lot of them are specific to business processes for specific purposes. If we've got a tool to do estimates, why can't I drive content recommendations into that estimator tool? Catch you while you're doing your estimations. I can share things like risks. Projects like this had risks like this. Here's some content that you might want to think about. Here's an offer that you might want to go talk to the customer about selling because it's based on the metadata we have in the estimator tool. So remove the need to go search, push as much as you can. It makes them much happier. Then below the line, there's more than one source of truth. This we got out of the feedback from the users. When you're in an environment, and how many of you guys are in an environment where you got multiple tools that your users have to go through? I imagine most, right? It's not an unusual scenario. What we heard back from the users is, yeah, campus isn't the only place for all this content. We, on the campus team, would like to think it is. It's not the reality. The content's sitting all over the place. There's more than one source of truth. So then it comes to integration. You have to get that data pulled in and integrated from these other sources. And you have to make it easy to the user. That's the tough part, right? Simplification is hard. So we have to integrate this content, but we have to do it in a way that is masking the complexity for the user and just shows up in the search results regardless of where it sits. And then the right content might not be the best content. So this of course all of this varies with org, but the right content that might not be the best just means that we've got managed content out there, and that's what our corporate leadership is really pushing, is to go use that content. But there are a lot of times when the best content that you need is sitting in a project site that somebody created and didn't share and the community shared. So being able to surface that kind of content and do so in a relevant way is important. So we don't necessarily want to, the nutshell of this one is we don't necessarily want to take a whole category of content and push it out of search, because the most relevant stuff could very well be there. So I broke this down into 3 things. By the way, purposely, the middle column is called machine learning. That is a huge buzzword. So everybody wants to know, and I'm sure you guys have been asked, why aren't you doing machine learning in your search, or why don't you have machine learning on this? My favorite one, I love this one. Go machine learn that. Oh, I love that one. It took a long time for me to be convinced that ML didn't actually stand for marketing language. One of the first presentations this week actually mentioned how, there were a lot of implementations where AI wasn't quite meeting the expectation. So I purposely, just for political reasons, put machine learning as the category on that second bucket. But I broke this into 3 things. One is user profiles. So this is that context thing. So understanding the user and their environment, who they are. And this isn't, and this is something else that I've been against for, quote, not against, I shouldn't say it, that's not the right way to say it. I'm not a supporter in many cases of the skill profiles, especially the ones where the user goes in and says, I can do this, I can do that, I have this level of proficiency. Because a lot of times that becomes like a career builder type of thing. I don't want to work on this, so I don't know anything. I do want to work on this, and I don't really know it, but I'm an expert. So they tend to be a little misleading. But what tells you the most about a user is what they do. What documents have they authored? What have they contributed to? So looking at the authors and the last modified bys and things like that in SharePoint. So what are you working on? What projects are you assigned to? So, and then you can infer from that the industries and the products and technologies and things like that. It's inferring somebody's expertise based on their activity. And that includes things like what communities you belong to, the messages you're posting. Now, we had some grand plans here that got kind of shot down, or at least a wrench thrown in them for now when GDPR came along. So we haven't made as much progress on that side as we would like, because we're still waiting for some of the shakeout of what we can and can't track on users. So things like downloads and that. I can track what documents you authored, because that's just common information available sitting in SharePoint. But the download information's a little more iffy, so we've got to work through some issues there. So I have a limited profile now versus what we would really like to have. The center part, though, is about that whole enrichment pipeline piece. Making your content, especially the unmanaged content, where you don't have all that rich tagging, you don't have that deep understanding of what the content is. How do you then get to that? How do you then improve the base of information you have about a document that will help improve search? And then, of course, using all the data that you have about downloads and uploads and activity and things like that for recommenders. And then the final thing that we were looking at is the user experience. Rebuild the UX and put the user in charge. Build a UX that allows us to extract the context from the explicit context as much as we can, and apply the machine learning, the recommenders, and things like that where it makes sense. So I'm going to start in the middle one, the machine learning piece. So we have something somewhat unique when it comes to campus, is that we sit in the SharePoint Online internal tenant. So SPO does support content enrichment. It does not on our internal tenant. They've turned that feature off. So I'm not able to do a lot of things in SPO Online and the tenant we're in that you guys having your own tenant or in a shared tenant would be able to do. So we had to do something a little different. And what we had to do was get our content out of SharePoint, which is surprisingly difficult. So the approach we took is we connected webhooks to all the document libraries. And these webhooks detect changes. So if somebody uploads a new document, if somebody modifies a document, things like that, that triggers an event. And what we do there is the event goes into a job, the job puts it into a blob storage container. So we actually copy the document out of SharePoint and we put it into Azure. Because there's two things going on here. One is we need to do the enrichment work, and the other is we're driving a lot of search now from campus through Azure instead of SharePoint. And there's some reasons that we went there besides just the content enrichment. Is the other thing we were running into is being in that tenant, and this is again is going to be unique to us, is that's also where MSIT and the product group play. So the product group comes up with a new feature, they want to test it and dog food it before it goes out to the customers, push it into the tenant for Microsoft, and then we see things break. And this stops working, or that stops working, or for the 5th time, this doesn't work anymore. So we were running into a lot of issues like that. We were running into crawler issues, and it wasn't helpful. Our users were not happy. And they weren't really willing to make that distinction, that, well, this was you and not you. And so we decided we'll move as much of the workload for search out to Azure as we can. And this was the result. What we decided to do from a content enrichment standpoint was first we got to get the content out and into Azure where we can work with it, so you dump it into a blob. Then what we do is we create Azure Logic apps and Azure Functions. So Azure Logic app is like a workflow. So you create a Logic app that says start here, if this, do this, if that, do that. And it's just building out the logic for how you want to process whatever it is you're doing. It's a workflow tool. It's one thing it can be used for. There's more to it than just that, but that's the nutshell of it. And an Azure function is just literally a function that can be triggered by an event that goes off and executes one small thing. So we purposely went this direction with these microservices and serverless architecture because we can scale this. Sometimes a lot of work is coming in. Sometimes a lot of files get uploaded, where one function running would not necessarily scale very well. We'll need more. So you can scale up these functions. You can create up to, I think, 16 instances of these things. They can run up to 15 minutes. A function's designed to be short-lived. So it just gets triggered, it runs, it puts its output, and then it's done. And then you trigger it again or whatever, right? We have a queue for this, and we can scale out the number of functions. So what we do is we build a function for each of the different types of processing we want to do. We have an Azure function that does pre-processing. So in text analytics, one of the things you want to do is clean the stuff up before you do anything else to it. So you want to remove stop words, right? The and, because you don't want the topics to show up as and the, otherwise it will. So we have an Azure function that when a new document comes in or an updated one, it gets fed over to this one and that cleans out the document. If we want to do like stemming or elementization, we can do that with a function. We do topic extraction with a function. We do a scoring model that's called BM25, if you're familiar with that one, which is this topic has a BM25 score of X in this document. And what that's doing is it's giving you a measure of its significance in the document. So we have the BM25 scoring function for topics as well. We have a language extraction, similarity scoring. This is one that we custom built, and this takes a document A and compares it to a document B to see how close the two are. Very simplified version, but think of it like a plagiarism checker. And we do that because then you can light up features like more like this. So if a user finds something that they like, they can do more like this, and we show them 5 or 6 of them that fall within a range of this one's topic. We do it based on topics extracted from the document. And then we do a auto summarization. So in the unmanaged space, most users don't bother with a description. But then in your UX, when you go to show the document, if you don't have a description, what do you show them? Usually it's a title or a first paragraph or something, but it's really not very helpful. So there's some good models out there for summarization that just extracts a couple of sentences from a document or X% of a document into a summary. So we have functions. All of these functions some of them are from Microsoft Cognitive Services. Some of them are not. And the nice part about the Azure Function Model is we're able to use like the Python text analytics code. Yeah, you can run that in an Azure function. That's not a problem. So that's the model we chose because it gives us a lot of flexibility in what models we use and how we tweak them and maintain them over time if they're things that need to be trained, like entity extraction. We're working on a custom one now for entity extraction that will extract our Microsoft products from a document so we can do auto tagging. And then we'll tackle things like industry and other categorization models. So on the inside of it, when we're talking about machine learning, we've gone down this path of the logic, apps, and functions. The extract of any of this work is stored into a Cosmos DB. Now, those of you who are familiar with graph might be wondering why we don't do a graph, because we did this before Cosmos DB added graph. That's why. We're actually going to be doing some work with graph in the near future, because a lot of this really does support that. And what this does give us is the ability to, like the Cosmos DB people, the content that goes in there is based on this processing model, or part of the content. I'll show you the rest in a minute. So we pull out who's the author, and they're in the people database is where we put in, these are the documents this person's authored or modified. And then here's the topics about these documents. These then become part of the metadata about a person. And then for projects, we do the same thing. Here's the documents associated to this project, and we use the topics from those documents as metadata on the project. So when you're searching for a project, we have deeper data about that project to determine relevance. And then each of these then feeds into a search index. So we then have the corresponding search indexes that we use on the end. So I mentioned also, there's more than one source of truth. We have to integrate. We have to get more data. Now, I work in a tools team. Campus is one tool. There's 4 or 5 others. We have a CRM system. We have a project management system. And we also have an estimation system, for example. So these 3 systems, just these 3, and then we've got others. All of these are mostly data-driven. They store their data in a database. So what we're doing here is we create views of the data, and then for any SQL people, search, especially, well, search in general, but Azure search, forces SQL people to think unnaturally about data because you have to flatten it. Instead of normalizing where you're creating 15 tables of abstraction, with search, you're flattening the data back down. So you're not doing the references and the keys, you're just flattening data across the system. So what we do is we get the data folks that are the providers of the data to give us a view of their data that has the flattened data in there. So we know what product and what industry and what the project is and all the associated IDs and status and things like that into one view. And then we build or create a source that connects to that view, and then an indexer that tells it how to process that data. And the nice part about one of the things we can do with Azure Search is you can have indexers store data in multiple indexers store data in one index. So like the projects index, I can get data from our campus system about projects and put that in there. I can get document data and put that in there. As long as I have a reference that's unique across all these systems, in our case we do, we call it an opportunity ID. That is associated to all these different systems, and that's a unique ID. Therefore, I can use that to say, okay, for this opportunity, here's all the files and their data. Here's the project site and campus and its data. Here's the people, so on and so forth. So we can use that, and these indexers are able to do this and update that information in the single search or single index. So we pull that data in from all these external systems, and we're putting it flattened in a flattened state into the search indexes. So that's the enrichment side, and then how we got the multiple sources and the more than one source of truth. The next part that we've been focused on is the UX. So how do you then extract the context from the user when it comes to the explicit context? So when we designed this, we purposely chose and went after a few things. One is assume nothing. The other is put the user in charge and provide them the ability to personalize this. There was somebody, and I don't know if she's here, who mentioned earlier, I think it was Tuesday, that she got feedback. Here's the set of refiners. She got feedback that I wish we could refine. And she's looking at it saying, it's right there. We get the same feedback. And I totally get it because we've gotten that many times before. So what we wanted to do when we came up with this is, one, simplify the search page as much as possible, make the search results the front and center thing, and then offer options to the user. So we've got a few things going on here. One is scopes, one is subscopes. So back to when we did those discussions, what are you looking for? I'm looking for content, people, projects, and sometimes customer. Those are our scopes. So and we offer those, if you'll see the search box in the upper right where it says all, if you click the drop down, the user can pick the scope there when they start the search. But we don't assume that that's where they want to go. So we offer it on the search page. That's where, if you tell us you want projects, that's the scope we take you to. But the others are still there. You can still bounce across them because we don't want to assume that that's where you need to be. Maybe that was just your starting point. Then we offer the subscope. So I want to extract more context from you. If it's content, tell me more. So in content, there could be, I'm looking for the package stuff. Remember I mentioned the managed IP is kind of packaged. It's called IP kits and offers. So maybe you're looking for that. So I give you subscopes for that. If you're looking for managed IP, and you don't see that here right now where it says documents, we've made a change. We're separating the project data, the project files from the managed files. Because one piece of feedback we've gotten is, I don't know what's authoritative. So what we want to do with our subscopes, it's right there. Make it a big button. That's your authoritative content. If you want to look for the project content, click on this one. And then we'll show you the search results from either one, whichever one you've chosen. And then even when it comes to the UX itself, users like to look at things different ways. Different users have different needs and think differently. So we offer all kinds of ways for them to change things. We have, in the upper right, you'll see a set of icons for personalization where they can go if they want to change how the results are sorted. We give you every column, you can sort on that column. Or you could revert it back to the default. So you click the drop down and that will change based on where you are in the UX. So we remember in this session what you've set, and as you're bouncing around and coming back, we remember what you had and we'll show it to you the way you had it. Or you can go back to the default sort order, which is the result set that we got back from the Azure search. You can turn different elements of the UX on and off. So like the left filters versus the top bar. So there is some repeat. You'll notice where it says filters, keyword, tools, domains, things like that. Those same filters show up on the left if you were to click and enable the left section. This is part of personalization though. We let the user tell us, which one do you want, or do you want both? We decided to leave the top one, the horizontal one, on by default just because it looked a little cleaner. It was a little less busy. And it being a drop down, and when you have longer lists of things, it's easier to display a longer list in a drop-down than it is in a refiner section in a typical like SharePoint search page. And we can put a little search box in there. It says search for, and then you do the whatever. So you can search for it if it's a real long list of values like products or something. But the user can turn that on and off, and we remember that over sessions. So that's part of the personalization. If you didn't want to see the left refiners, you tell us that now. The next time you log in, they're not there. You can always turn them back on, but we do remember what you've set. And then the way we display the search results. We have two different options that you have even on the view. So here is our table kind of grid view. A lot of folks, and we've done now user studies as we built this, we went back to those same people and validated what we were doing. The interesting bit I found was it was for left refiners versus the horizontal. It was kind of 50-50 on whether people liked one or the other. We did find in a POC I did about 1.5 years ago that folks tended to use the horizontal refiners more. They immediately saw them and did them and worked with them. the ones on the left, which is really odd because the ones on the left are pretty standard on every site you go to, were the ones that they tended not to interact with. Go figure. But, so we offered both, and you can turn them on. And then the others for the view, we have an option for the table view or a tile view or a card view. And this is, again, part of the personalization. We remember what you told us. Some folks were telling us, it's easier to scan in a grid. So just show me a table of the results, give me a bunch of columns, let me sort on them. Cool, we did that. But then other folks kind of like the card view, like you see, the kind of Delve kind of started it for us anyway with card view. So we created a card that presents much of the same information, just in a more concise way in a card. A lot of folks like this as well, so we offer you the option. You can do either one. We don't care which one you pick, we'll remember what you did. So in your next session, we'll display it the same way. And there's the left filters here, by the way. So we do turn them on. They do look very much like the SharePoint filters. This page is built as an Azure page. And the other one that we added, and this came out of our POC as well, is a tag bar. So any tags, any filter values you're picking as you're going along, we add it to that tag bar. So you can get a form of a breadcrumb and understand how you got where you are, and we give you the ability to remove individual tags from there or clear the whole thing. And then finally, how much time have we got left?
7 minutes.
Ooh, perfect. Almost like I planned it. A lot of the entry points we have for search are containers. So like a project. You think about a project. We think about a project site as a container. It contains documents and contains people. So the approach we decided to take is we would show it like a container on the search results. So we do have a tile view for this, by the way. It just shows a project site as a tile and then lists a few files or people, depending on the subscope you choose. In the grid view, we went to a kind of a child-parent type of relationship where you expand the project container, and then you choose whether you want to see people through your subscope or the documents in that. And this is just data we're pulling from those search indexes I shared earlier. And then the user can go through. Now, for the people, we actually do organize those by the key people. So in a project, there's typically an engagement manager who has the relationship with a customer. There's normally an architect or at least a lead architect. So we'll show those folks, the key people, as the first set, and then if they want to see others on the team, then you got the little spinner control you see on the right side where they can go through and see the full list. And then the files are the same thing. We put the files up that we display or that are part of the project site, and we order them by the most viewed. And then they can spin through those if they want to see all of the files. And clicking on one of these just takes you to the project site. On the previous one, I did neglect to mention. On the right, you'll see like a bookmark. Our last presenters here referred to it as well as pinning. We just refer to it as favorites. So if there's documents or projects or people, we allow the user to favorite anything. So if they find a document they like or a resource they like or a project site, because sometimes project sites are used for more than just a customer engagement. Some teams might get together and decide to store their IP for the team in a project site. We let them spin them up themselves, and then they can favorite them. And then we've got a version of the page, the search page, that shows you all your favorites. And then you can search that as well to kind of get down to exactly what you're after. So we allow them to favorite any number of things. And then ratings and reviews, we do support that. They can give it a 5-star rating, and we tell you how many reviews there are. There's ratings, there's comments that they can provide. We don't display it here, but there's a dialog box. If you click on the rating, you'll see who rated it, what the star rating was, and if they put any comments. You'll see the comments in that dialog. And that is actually it for me. Are there any questions? Yes.
Wait a minute. Let me just... Now that we have a microphone that actually works.
Yes, very cool.
Who's that? Who's there? There you go. Sorry.
So I did notice on one of the pages that there was an advanced search.
Yes.
How is that different from what you're showing on the results page? And the other question is, does someone have to initiate a search to get to the pages that you showed?
So for the first question, the advanced search is an evolving story, but what we do right now is we take you to a page that has a lot of all the metadata, or not all, right now it's the key metadata. So for us, it's things like the domain you're in, the product you could be looking for, the industry, things like that. So it's a series of drop downs. And then we do give you the option to toggle whether it's and or. If you don't tell us, we consider between fields as an or. So they go through and they can set up their search and then submit it.
So
That's the advanced search. To get to the search page, yes, we do require them to do a search of some kind. It can be a very basic search. Or we also have an entry point in what we call our mega menu, which, oops, well, yep, I lost it. Our mega menu, which is just for content. If they go there and click on something from our content mega menu, it would show our search page. So it would automatically filter to what they selected. So there's different ways they get to that page.
Yeah, in the first slide you shares a few stats. So I'm wondering which tools are you using to do the analysis?
Power BI. So Power BI and App Insights. So App Insights. So what we do is everything on our pages throughout campus. We have App Insights enabled, and we have a code for, if you can click it, there's a code for it. And then we can take that data and build even like a heat map type of thing that shows you on the page, a view of the page, a mock-up of it, what people are clicking on, and how many clicks. And then Power BI reports.
If you want to go to the lectern and find your slide.
Thank you.
So, we have another question.
So you spoke a lot about how you addressed the user base who thought the old search sucked and wanted something new, and you solved for that. Did you have issues with, once you implemented this new search, dealing with the other half of the user base who liked it the way it was, or had gotten used to whatever flaws were in the old system and knew their workarounds, understood how to get to what they needed, and then were forced to learn a new system? And what did you do to address that?
That is a great question, and not yet. This is all very new, and we're still deploying into production a lot of it. So we haven't run in yet to the folks that were very used to the old model and providing us feedback otherwise. One of the things that we're doing to roll this out is we do a thing called campus office hours, where we get all the users that have been on campus for the last 90 days. We send them an email and invite them to an online Skype session, and we go through whatever, and it's a 1-hour session. And we're going to be running a bunch of those for this as we deploy it full-time into production. Right now it's an opt-in model for the user, so you don't see it on these mock-ups, but we give the user the ability to opt in to use our new search. So far, the feedback's been great. We haven't had somebody come back and complain yet. They've had requests to add features, which we're putting into our backlog, and it's great, but nobody's canned it yet. So I got one question.
I have a question about your indexes. In comparison to the original data sources, how large, what percentage are your indexes? Because when we're dealing with, I work with federal agencies, and when you're dealing with terabytes of data and then having to index it, how much more storage do we have to allow for the indexes? Do you have a percentage, or?
Honestly, not off the top of my head. So the search indexes themselves, yeah, I would have to look, to be honest. I don't know off the top of my head what size they are. Our total database of all the documents, though, that we're hosting is only a couple of terabytes. So we're definitely not at that scale. So I don't know if we'd be a good indicator for you or not, but I know from a performance perspective, it's still in, yeah, millisecond time frames for search results. But yeah, I don't honestly know what the size of it is.
Got another question from back here?
Yeah, I have a question about actually the slide you have here, where you have shown the result as cards. Is that some kind of a default setting in SharePoint search in 2013 or
So this page
online
is
or something
actually-
like that?
This page is actually a web page that we built in Azure, so we're not using SharePoint for this. And so it's all custom. The card and the list view are custom. We default to list view and then let the user choose.
Yeah. Hold on one second.
It's all custom, I can see that.
Yep.
How many people has it taken to build this, maintain this? And is this, you guys are a tech company, we're not, right? We buy product. And we depend on, in my case, depend on you guys. Is this stuff that's kind of like being tested through your process of, using it so that it can be applied later to Azure Search or Microsoft Search, or how many people? That's the biggest thing, because it's hard enough just to staff a search team.
So we've got, when it comes to the development of this, we're on a sprint model, 4-week sprint. I've got an architect we outsource to a company to do our development for campus. So we've got an architect and 3 devs. And we've been working on this page, just to build the page, we've been working on it for about 3 sprints. So we've about 3 months to get the core functionality, get most of it up and running. A lot of the work now is more dependent on me getting the data lined up. We're using the information architecture that we had with campus. So we had a pre-existing IA that we're just leveraging here because a lot of the data was already available.